Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about making tax digital. If you don't know anything about this and you are a landlord, you do need to know about it. It is hurtling your way at a rate of knots. I'm Mark Epps, and please take the time to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm at Mark Epps across all social media channels. Today we're joined by Mark Stemp from Crowe UK, a leading property tax expert, and James Kilpatrick from Hammock, the first landlord-specific software that was approved, I think, James.
Yes, that's correct.
So I think we'll start off with you, if that's okay. Why is HMRC keen to get MTD implemented, and what is it?
So it's been coming for a very long time, probably for a decade or so, as a vision from
really?
HMRC. And I remember the first time I heard about it was digital tax, and that was before VAT became digital as well. And the change that was going to come to us was all around trying to encourage particular types of taxpayers, and today we're talking about landlords. So there's landlords and also self-employed people to do more regular updates with HMRC. And the UK government, UK HMRC, they basically wanted to drive forward digitally and lead the way. Lots of barriers got in the way of them implementing these things. And so just COVID being the main one, they had
taking up all parliamentary time, and nothing got done.
That was very much the issue. And while they had the vision to try and bring it forward and to get it implemented, there were so many barriers that meant that it just couldn't happen. They had to reallocate resource to other areas. And we've got to the position now that we're just round the corner from the implementation of making tax digital for income tax. So from April, that's when landlords are going to have to be thinking about and probably implementing the making tax digital. So the main rules that we just need to be aware of is it will impact you if you're a landlord and or a self-employed person, so that you're completing those pages on your current tax return. If you've got turnover, so that's income, we're not talking about profit. If you've got turnover, so rental income of more than £50,000 being submitted on the tax return for the 24-25 tax year. So that's the tax return that's due in this January. So when you submit your tax return this January, you'll know whether or not you've got to do making tax digital for income tax.
So that 50,000 isn't just the rent. So if you are self-employed, it would be what you're taking as your self-employed earnings plus your rent. The two combined would add up to that 50,000.
That's right.
So if you're not self-employed, then if you've got income of more than 50,000 from your rentals, it is that figure. If you're self-employed, it's the sum of the two.
Two together, exactly. And the way that they've got four streams of income, and I know you've spoken about two things, talking about self-employed, but you've sort of got the UK self-employed figures being submitted across. You may have a second self-employment, so you've got to do another set of figures. And then you've got UK rental profits, and then you've got overseas rental profits. So it might well be that if you've got two self-employments and UK and overseas income from property, you've got to do four sets of submissions, not just one. But the majority of people I expect that are listening to us today are probably landlords. You've got to look at their income. If it's over £50,000 on the tax return they're just about to submit, then they're going to be in making tax digital. The tax office is going to write to people to let them know when they submit their tax returns, and they've already done it for tax returns that have been submitted up to around about now.
Check your post.
Indeed, if you get a post. But yeah, they've written to people to say, thank you for sending in your tax return. We've looked at your numbers, you're now in making tax digital. And so therefore you've got to follow a process to get in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Because there are three different tiers, aren't there? There's the first tier that's coming in April.
That's right.
Next year.
Yeah, for those with £50,000 or more of income.
And then the following year, April, it's
£30,000.
30,000. And the following year it's 20,000, I think,
exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So they'll be phased in depending on how much income that you've got from your landlord business or your self-employed business.
And I think if your income is less than 20,000, you probably aren't
We're not
going
in at the
to
moment.
be.
Interestingly, that the draft legislation, I believe, still says 10k, which was the original threshold before they delayed it. So I don't know about you, it wouldn't surprise me hugely if it did. If the first 3 tiers are a success, I suspect they will just want to catch everybody. But that is just, it's not in, it's not necessarily definitely happening, but it's just my.
Well, you say catch everybody. My take on it is that it actually just makes for a more efficient system, both for HMRC and for landlords as well, because you're not going to be getting any nasty surprises. You're submitting quarterly returns, ergo nothing's suddenly going to appear at the end of the year that's going to take you by surprise.
Well, and the system's designed to encourage you to understand your profit as you go along. So when you submit your first quarterly submission, the tax office is going to say, we think your tax bill's starting to build up and it's this much. So there shouldn't be any surprises, where at the moment, when you submit your tax return on the 31st of January following the end of the year, so ages after you've made your profit, you've got to remember to pay the tax and you're not quite sure what your profit was because you haven't quite calculated it until you submit your tax return. So keep reminding you of your tax bills every time you submit a quarter. It's building a picture of your overall tax is really helpful so people don't get these surprises. You can't say you didn't know your tax bill's due because actually you've been submitting it and building it as the year progresses.
But you're not paying quarterly, you're just submitting quarterly. You're paying at the end of the year, I think.
You're paying with normal due dates for tax. So what you're paying at the moment, you're going to continue to pay, which is typically on the 31st of January and the 31st of July if you make payments on account. They're the payment dates. In the first incarnation of Making Tax Digital, they actually, and that's quite some time ago now, they released some documents about voluntarily paying your tax early, and they started to think about a system to bring forward those payment dates, but that's not come back in the current Making Tax Digital.
So it is sensible maybe for people to start jumping on this now, just get used to the system. And systems are out there. In fact, you have one that's very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe you could talk us through that.
Yeah, I'm the head of business development at Hammock, and we are the first landlord-specific software that is fully compliant with
I should say we have looked at quite a lot of software systems, and yours came out heads above the rest. We were very impressed with it, very impressed with you. And in fact, you are the recommended software for Crowe as well, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think the reason we've been so successful is we did not build Hammock for Making Tax Digital, right? We built Hammock 7 years ago. Actually, a lot of the things you were just talking about, our CEO had multiple properties, was busy, it wasn't his day-to-day, wasn't able to stay on top of it as much as he'd like to. He would get to the end of the year, have no idea what he was supposed to pay, often getting late fines for submitting his taxes late, surprise tax bills, and was just like, there must be a better way. And he obviously works in tech. Open banking as a technology was getting more prevalent with the likes of Xero and things like that, and realised actually there's a huge gap here for landlords, because a landlord's business is actually quite different to let's call it a generic business where you have one owner, you have money in, money out, and you just want to know your total profit. You think if you look at a landlord's portfolio, look at your clients, they won't own all of their properties in just their name. There'll be some joint ownership, mixed ownership. They'll have multiple tenants, multiple tenancy types. They'll have HMOs, they'll have residentials, commercial. There's so much going on, and landlords don't want one number. They want, how much am I making per property? How much do my tenants owe per tenancy? And then how is everything split per owner? So we built Hammock to solve that problem on an annual basis.
And it just slots in very nicely to what's been introduced now with Making Tax Digital.
Yeah, exactly.
So the government is insisting now you can't file paper returns. It has to be on a government registered software system.
That's right, and that is a big
digital platform.
And that is the big change. So at the moment, people can do tax returns, do self-assessment tax returns. HMRC provides some software people can use at the moment, and for some who choose not to use software, they can still submit a paper tax return. as soon as they reach the threshold that means they're in making tax digital, they're required to use specific software. Those specific pieces of software will be submitting to HMRC, and they've got to be proper links between the software and HMRC to make sure that you're submitting digitally in the right way. But one of the key areas of making tax digital isn't just the submission of figures to HMRC, it's making sure they collect digital records, making sure that the landlord is collecting all that information, making sure that they're storing all of that information digitally, rather just a load of paper in the drawer waiting for the accountant to come along to sort all that out and produce a profit and loss account. And so, such as Hammock, they're really encouraging those electronic records and making sure people are using the right types of software to make that easy.
So, for instance, if I've bought a load of furniture, I'm not going to just present them with the IKEA receipt. There'll be a proper digital.
Yeah, I mean, the most common way to use our software is to connect your bank feed. So you have a bank account that your property income and expenses are going into. It doesn't have to be an account that only your property income and expenses are going in, but you just need to categorize your property transactions. And the beauty of this type of software that's linked to your bank feed is it learns. And so actually, once you've categorized one rent payment, next month when that tenant pays, it tracks itself. Same with your mortgage. Your insurance, anything regular and recurring. So you get to a stage pretty quickly where a lot of your bookkeeping is happening automatically. But to your example, you go and buy some furniture, you put it on your card, the transaction feeds through, you just categorize it, say which property it relates to. You can even attach the receipt if you want to. It's not actually a requirement. I think your accountant would probably appreciate it if you are doing that. And it just means that you have instant idea what's happening with your properties. I mean, you work with landlords all the time. How many of them do you think, if you ask them, would know exactly how much money they're making on each of their properties, what their yields are? I guess you're staying on top of their tenants and their arrears, so they're not having to worry about the maintenance. But I do think most landlords, they don't actually know how much money they're making, or in some cases not making.
Or no idea at all. So it's very useful that your system will provide that extra layer of information on top. So it's not just providing the service for the HMRC. There's a whole different layer happening as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with our software, because we have one client, and that is a landlord. We don't do anything else. So the comment we always get from landlords, because I think most landlords are fairly resistant to change. I mean, we're all resistant to change, I would say. But certainly when it comes to MTD, there's a lot of landlords who see this as more expense, more effort, and very little return. And then actually you put them on, so Crowe will be you're recommending Hammock for their landlords, and those landlords will immediately go, okay, I might not see a benefit to MTD itself, but the benefits to digitization are massive. You're getting instant real-time reminders, notifications if your rent hasn't been paid, notifications on how much money you're making. You can even get alerts on important deadlines, so you can stay compliant with the renters' rights bill, which I'm sure you're very familiar with at the moment. There's so much coming in that landlords have to stay on top of, and actually if you digitize your process, suddenly you get all these additional benefits. And I say that is why Hammock has been so popular, because we are not just an MTD solution, we are a landlord solution that happens to cover MTD, and I think landlords really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, and if you look at it from the other lens of HMRC, what HMRC is trying to do, they're trying to make sure people are paying the right amount of tax. And by having in place these automated systems, it basically means we haven't got the leakage of any tax. So people are going to be paying the right amount of tax.
Underpayments.
Exactly. But in fact, you're not having to reinvent your records well after the end of the tax year to submit your tax return, try and remember where those receipts were, or go through your bank trying to work out which expenditure related to what. You'll be able to do this in real time.
So a lot of landlords will be using accountants, of course, like yourself. So this really isn't going to make a huge difference to them, because it will be the accountant doing the work that they're already doing. Would you use a system like Hammock, for instance, or?
Yeah. So what's important for our clients is to make sure it's streamlined and easy. Yeah. And a system like Hammock will be able to identify expenditure for tax reliefs.
So would you use Hammock as an accountant?
Yes. So the way
for your clients.
That's right. So the way that Hammock's set up.
Interesting.
So the way that Hammock's set up will mean that I, as an accountant, can log in to my client's system as well as the client can log into the system.
Okay.
To make sure that we can check that all the integrations from the bank feeds, we can look through the receipts, work out, categorise things so it's in the right place when we're finishing off the tax at the very end of the year.
That makes things so nice and easy, doesn't it?
Well, that's right. And there's going to be quarterly submissions to HMRC, and some of my clients are thinking I could do with that support from an accountant to make sure that quarterly submission to the tax office is correct. And then as the year progresses off, we've got 4 quarters submitting income and expenditure to HMRC, and then there's this final submission. And the way to think of a final submission, it's like a tax return that we used to do, where we make all of the adjustments, we work out what is tax relievable, what's not tax relievable, what things have we missed out, what extra things can we pop in there that maybe we didn't capture as things went through because maybe you put it somewhere else on a different credit card that's not been, you hadn't remembered at the time, to make those automatic adjustments later.
So it's easy to pick up on things that you've forgotten along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And how easy is it, do you think, going to be for accidental landlords? There are a lot of landlords out there who've maybe got 1 or 2 properties. Everything is a paper trail moving to digital. It doesn't sound like a difficult process, to be honest.
It's not, and I think
but people are going to be worried about it.
Of course.
I'm sure.
Like
this isn't me. A lot of people may choose to use accountants because of it, but it's not a difficult process.
I think you're going to see a lot of movement. I think that the truth is, and I'd be interested to get your take on this, I think making tax digital is a bigger change for landlords than for sole traders, because many landlords, the exact landlords you're talking about, do not think of it as a business. They think of it as they have a property or 2 on the side, and it is on the side.
And this is one of the main things HMRC are trying to do, just introduce the notion that if you are a landlord, you are a professional property landlord.
Yeah, and you can go into whether or not you agree with the approach on all of that stuff, but you're absolutely right. I do think even a small sole trader, they know it's their business and they think of it as their business, and lots of them do want to know what's going on every day. Landlords are very much not that. I'm a landlord. I didn't used to be I am the exact person that we're talking about. I used to be, where it's on the side. When I used to do my tax return, I was always overpaying tax because I could never remember my expenses. Unfortunately, you always know your income, but you always underreport your expenses because you're looking through a bank account that's got 90% personal transactions, things you spent 18 months ago. And actually, the minute you digitize it, everything becomes easier, but it's getting over that hurdle of change. And that's the thing. And I think because these landlords don't think of it as like a primary thing in their brain, they think it's going to be really difficult. But we just see, you just look at the reviews on the software, it's actually really cool because it's just lots of landlords, usually of a certain age, because it takes time to build up assets to earn 50k of income, who don't think they're tech savvy, don't think they want to change, and then they do, and they love it, and they don't actually talk about the making tax digital element. It's all the other things that have made their life easier, and they feel more in control, they know what's going on, and that kind of thing.
And that's the experience that I've had with my clients, in that before it was a pain doing the taxes, where now they're able to log into some software that's worked all of this stuff out for them, and actually they've got additional information they never had before, such as how well is my property performing, what things could I do in order to change the income, change the expenses, when's the right time to spend things, so they actually understand their business better, where before they weren't thinking at being a business, so therefore not necessarily maximising their yield and sort of considering all the information they've now got at their fingertips.
We have kind of touched on it. Who is exempt from this at the moment?
So you probably need to be careful about exempt, because you have to apply for an exemption in order to get that to work.
Interesting.
But in short, we know who's in. So landlords with the over £50,000, or if you've got self-employed over £50,000, the people that...
Not necessarily if you're a landlord, because you might be set up as a company, and some companies are exempt as well, I think.
So these are individuals that are going into that pay income tax. So if you're in a corporate, you've got corporation tax and other systems to think through. Okay. But with regards to exemptions, they've introduced some, so if you're digitally excluded, so that's a concept that we've had with regards to tax returns before and some other things from the government. You have to you fill in a form, you have to make a claim to be exempted. So you're in it unless you're able to wiggle out of the system. And so So maybe you're digitally excluded because of your ability to use a computer. There are certain types of landlords. So if you're an offshore person, so a non-resident person, then they're saying for the first year you don't need to do making tax digital, but you'll probably be in for the following year. If you've not got a national insurance number, and you should never have had a national insurance number, then you're probably not in the system as well. So there are certain people, ministers of religion, they're exempt. There's some other categories where they just haven't got their software at HMRC's end under control to be able to work with all those particular types of taxpayers. But I see some of those starting to be put into the system in due course.
I think certainly, we run regular webinars, live recorded, all to landlords and accountants actually.
And if somebody wanted to see those, where would they go?
If they head to usehammock.com, they'll find everything there. But I guess the questions that always come up, and they come up no matter how many times we pump the message out, we always get these same questions. Is, to your point, like people will say, well, I've got properties in a limited company. Are those included? No, they're not. I'm in a partnership. Is that included? No. But a partnership doesn't mean husband and wife who own property together. That's joint. It has to be a legal structure of a partnership. That's excluded.
Joint ownership. That's quite an interesting thing, isn't it? Mm. So, how does that work?
That's right.
If you don't mind me interrupting, we'll come back to that while I remember.
Did you want to talk it through how it works on your platform?
Oh yes.
But you're absolutely right. Joint ownership is a big worry for landlords, because I think if you were to go to a generic software that is not built for landlords, each of you would need to sign up separately for your own your software license. You would essentially have to duplicate all the same work and find some way of only taking a portion of each transaction. Again, Hammock is built for landlords, so it's built from the get-go to handle this. So the way Hammock works is slightly different. So you are obviously linking your transactions to properties, but Hammock knows how each of your properties is owned. So it knows how much of the income and expenses, if you two owned a property together 50-50, anything I assign to that property, 50 goes onto your tax return, 50 goes onto yours. So it actually means like a husband and wife, brother, sister, generally family who own property together can share a license. They only have to do the work once, they only have to pay once, but they get everything split out. And it does, I think that is, especially when you've got couples where, maybe the wife is really good at tech, the dad is very paper and pen. That means the wife can actually do the account, but it means like the husband is still getting their stuff taken care of, and that's kind of what my parents would be like. So, I think it's really useful in that sense.
And continuing with the exemptions.
Yeah,
I think of another word for it. Continuing with them.
The question, the common questions we always get, like you say, it's 50,000 of income, and some people think it's profit. It's not, it's income. People will also say, well, I'm employed by a company X, I get PAYE salary. Is that included? No, it's not. It's more about what is the type of income that's included. And so you just really have to think, do I own the properties in my personal name, or portions of these properties in my personal name? Do I have a sole trader? Add those two income numbers together, 50k or over, you're in. Next year, 30k and over, you're in, and 20k.
I think we have touched on it as well, that there are quarterly returns, and at the end of the year you submit your final return in the ordinary way.
Yeah, and the submission of the final return is quite similar to the way that people are doing their self-assessment tax returns at the moment. So that's going to be a proper summary of all of the tax year's income. So it auto-populate the software with the quarters you've already submitted. So you don't have to go retyping in any of your numbers again with regards to your rental income or your self-employed profits. But what you'll need to add on there are the things that haven't been captured throughout the year. So if you've got a job, so your employment income, if you've got some pension income come in, you'll pop your pension income on your final submission. You'll maybe have some dividends, some bank interest, and any other reliefs that are applicable, like gift aid relief and the like. So it sort of forms that end tax return that we used to call it. Now we're calling it a final submission. And you've got to submit that to the tax office. So that's going to be your total year of all of your income and all of your expenses all together. You send that to the tax office. Then that used to be for self-assessment as far as it went, but they've added something on since. What they're going to do is they're going to send you a notice to say, well, this is how much your tax is then, and you need to agree with that, and then that's your final submission when you agree that everything's complete at the tax office's end. And so we've got a little bit of extra to do than we used to have, which before we used to just log into the tax office and send everything across. Now you don't do that. We've got a bit more interaction because you'll be able to see your tax bill build up over the year. You'll know what your tax bill is at the end of the year in order to make your tax payments.
I know there was talk of penalties, and it worked on a point system for late quarterly submissions, etc. I think that's been dropped, hasn't it?
That's right, yeah. So in the budget we had a few weeks ago, they've said for the very first year of making tax digital, there's no penalties applying.
Interesting.
So I think that's really helpful. Sort of everyone, a sigh of relief as you've just done. Yeah. It means people can get going with it. From a risk perspective, try your best, get things submitted, but you're not going to get in trouble if you don't get it spot on first time. I think it's quite important that you embrace, and when I've been talking to the tax office, they're saying, make sure you send stuff in, make sure, end of the quarter, you've got a month. They want it to work. We want landlords to be compliant. We want people to know how much profit they're making. And so getting it submitted to the tax office, even if you send in, you didn't quite get all of your expenses because you didn't quite get everything to work, the following quarter, you just put the extra bits in. And so effectively you'll keep submitting for the quarters, and then eventually after the year, we'll have everything all perfect. But just keep going without the threat of penalties.
You raise a really interesting point there, because certainly in my conversations with HMRC, there's a real understanding. They know, like, first of all, these quarterly updates, they are not tax returns. They are not tax submissions, they are updates. And they know that they won't be 100% accurate. And that's not really the aim here. The aim is for HMRC to get a much better idea of what their tax revenues are likely to be come the final declaration. So I think if you're a landlord who are nervous about, oh God, what if I miss an expense? What, you really don't need to worry about that stuff. And as I say, the 4 quarters, you obviously submit each quarter, but they are cumulative. So if you submit Q1 and then you realise, oh, actually there was that, I spent £500 on a sink, I totally forgot about it. Categorise that transaction. When you submit to Q2, it's essentially overwriting Q1 with your latest update, which is for 6 months and so on. So I think in that sense, it really is just a case of, just stay on top of your bookkeeping as much as you can. You're going to miss a few things, I'm sure, and you'll catch those up at the end of the year. But if you actually are staying on top of your bookkeeping, then actually the submission piece is very simple, because you go in and you press a button to submit it. The work is the bookkeeping, and that's the thing. I think it's just encouraging people to do regular bookkeeping and automate it as much as you can using software. But actually, and then I think actually, I agree the soft landing is probably a good idea, so that people do have a bit of an idea. But equally, right now, we are in the middle of the MTD pilot, the testing phase. We've had hundreds of landlords who are, obviously a bit nervous about the process of MTD, who are actively joining the testing process and pressing that quarterly submission button right now in our software and in lots of softwares. And so I would encourage anyone watching this, if you are feeling remotely nervous, get on a software, make sure it's compliant, first of all, make sure it's the right one for you, but join the pilot, press that button, see, realize it's not that scary. And then I think you really go into April with an awful lot more confidence that actually this, it's not the big scary change that maybe you thought it was.
I think it's interesting, you were saying earlier that most landlords just don't know this is coming.
Well, certainly
and
a lot of
most agents aren't talking about it with their landlords either, I think.
Yeah, I think we were talking earlier. We're both surprised that
it's not our problem. You deal with your tax submissions.
I do understand that. I do think that is slightly changing now. I am seeing more agents who are thinking, oh, actually, all my clients are asking me about this. I need to have an answer. But I do think it's very much been put at the feet of accountants to kind of get the message out. I mean, obviously HMRC do a marketing campaign, but I do think a lot has been put on your hands and anyone in your field's hands to really get this message out. But I was chatting to a good friend of mine, my age, works in business, kind of on top of things, and I was talking about Hammock and what's coming and MTD, and he had no idea about it, and he will get caught in April. And I did say, and I said to him, have you spoken to your accountant about it? And he just hadn't spoken to his accountant, because he was, usually it's towards the end of the year when he speaks to his accountant. So I do think probably now is the time when maybe a lot of clients who haven't been reading those emails, because not everybody reads the newsletter email that you get and things. So I think as we're going into this year's tax submission season, I suspect more and more landlords will be having a conversation with Mark or someone like Mark, if they haven't already, finding out this is happening and then having to make a
A lot of landlords do obviously use managing agents, and those managing agents will be feeding a lot of the information into their systems for them. Well, we will be providing that information to them to feed digitally into their system. How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, the primary way of somebody using Hammock specifically is through your bank transaction. So you have a bank feed.
Right, okay.
But again, because we're built for landlords, when you create a tenancy in Hammock, you say, the rent's £1,000, my agent charges 10%, including VAT. So Hammock already knows that what you'd get in a normal month would be 900. So when that £900 hits your bank account, Hammock will already split that into £1,000 of rent and £100 of letting agent fees. And then any month where it's slightly under because of deduction, it will trigger a message to say, oh, this is less than expected. And you can say, yeah, that was a gas certificate, or that was maintenance. Yeah. So it's kind of feeds through the figure that you sent through.
That information through digitally.
Yeah, exactly.
It feeds seamlessly through to your platform,
exactly.
I think. Well, I think that's really interesting. Do you think there's anything else to cover off that people might need to know about?
So yeah, I just wanted to so there'll be some people listening and watching thinking, I don't have to do making tax digital for a few years because of their threshold. They're maybe at 20 or they're going in at the £30,000. But I've been talking about the taxation, and from a taxation perspective, and what's required for making tax digital. I think landlords should already be looking at making themselves familiar with their numbers, already using software. So when I talk to my clients that maybe aren't going into making tax digital straight away, they may be going in a year or two's time, I'm still encouraging them to take a look at this software, because they'll be able to work out what their income and expenditure is for their normal self-assessment tax return at the normal time of year, and they'll be familiar with what their returns are, they'll be familiar with the way the system works, and when they do need to do making tax digital, they're already set up. All they need to do is submit quarters.
But it's just useful anyway. It's just such a useful platform. If you're a landlord, why wouldn't you do it? It's got to be better than just filling out a ledger.
It's funny you say that. So the best email we receive is from people who have been using Hammock for years, and they'll email in and they'll say, oh, this making tax digital thing, like, what do we have to do? And we say, nothing. You're already using a fully compliant solution. They didn't sign up because of MTD, but they have, they just fully relaxed going into it, knowing they've already done, they're already doing their bookkeeping digitally. But yeah, why doesn't everybody do it? I've said it probably 3 times in this session. People don't like change until they do. Until you change, and then you suddenly realise that you do. And I think that's what will happen. I think. I have a lot of sympathy for accountants actually with making tax digital. I think a lot has been put on their plate in terms of the messaging and the work that's going to be involved, having to restructure the way they work with all of their clients, because essentially, this is the biggest change in personal tax in 30 years, right? And so a lot falls on your plate. But I do think we'll look back in 5 years, and by the way, I know it's very easy for me to say this as a software provider, but I do think we'll look back in 5 years and actually everyone will go, actually the system is better now. We don't have this situation where everybody leaves their tax return to the very last minute, and it's normal for accountants to be working till midnight all through January just to get all those tax returns in. And landlords won't be at home getting over Christmas, getting stressed because, oh God, I've got to start looking at my property returns and I don't know what I've spent, and all that anxiety, I'm hoping, will go away with just everyone doing a little bit more work throughout the year and not a lot of work at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think a call to action for people watching has got to be understand what date you're going to go into making tax digital. Also, if you've got an accountant already, talk to that accountant. If you've not got an accountant, find out what accountants are talking about to make sure you're getting yourself ready, because the sooner you get organised, the easier it's going to be for everybody.
And on that note, if you are looking for a good accountant, you could do a lot worse than Mark Stemp. So it's not all about making tax digital, it's buying a property. How do I set myself up? Am I a sole trader? Do I buy it in a limited company? There are a whole different plethora of things that you can help with. And we'll drop a link to Mark in the description below. And James, thank you so much. We highly recommend Hammock, and if you want to get in touch with Hammock, we'll drop a link in the description below as well. And I think you're offering a discount code to Winkworth as well, so if you put the discount code in as well, you get a nice little discount on your Hammock software. Thank you very much, guys. That's been fantastic. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on all my social media platforms at Mark Reps. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Well, I thought that was a great rehearsal. Very good.
So you haven't actually said, oh, sorry, I forgot to hit the record button.
No, I'm not. I'm not.